Make sure you don't miss a thing. Go to starzology.com/newsletter and sign up. Welcome to the Starzology Astrology Podcast. I'm your host, Alison Price, and I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Arwynne O'Neill.
Hello, Alison. It's great to be here.
So nice to have you once more. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about podcasting.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at which planet we think is ruling podcasting, and we're going to look at one very famous podcaster's chart.
Yeah.
So first of all, as an introduction if you're listening to this podcast, then you know what podcasting is, but it really apparently came up about 20 to 25 years ago, podcasting.
Yeah.
It's fed from your RSS feed, as I understand it.
Yeah. And
now you've got podcasting such as what we do, and then you have video podcasting on YouTube.
Yeah.
And many people do it. A lot of podcasts began during the COVID years, but faded.
Yeah.
But we actually did our first podcast way back in, 2013?
Yeah. We had it for almost 2 years.
Yeah. We were talking astrology back then.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how we were still and we're still talking about astrology now.
Yeah.
10
years later.
10 years later.
Yeah.
And so much to say.
Yeah.
So because podcasting, I think, because it's very new, clearly it wasn't known to the Greeks, it wasn't known 100 years ago, therefore it's a new thing. But astrologically, we have to say to ourselves, well, which planet do we think rules podcasting?
Right, absolutely. And I think it's Mercury for sure.
Absolutely. And why would you say that?
Well, it is the planet of communication. Mercury was the messenger of the gods. So if you think about ancient Greece, the predecessor to the podcaster would be the guy in the town square.
The town crier.
The town crier, exactly.
Hear you.
Yeah. Just yelling and standing on his literal soapbox. Or back then, I suppose it might have just been a wine crate or whatever. Yeah, an empty crate that they packed olives in or something.
Yes.
And just standing there and pontificating, and people would gather around and listen, and because people didn't read. Most people,
that's right,
weren't literate.
Yes.
And so that they got their news from word of mouth, and that would be from some dude literally standing there in the town square yelling and saying, hey, here's what's going on, here's the interesting stuff, here's the what the king or the emperor is up to, here's how we're doing in the wars that are going on, or whatever, like all of the stuff that all the news that's fit to print, so to speak. But yeah, they didn't have the printing press for another 1,500 years.
Yeah.
Or 2,000 or whatever.
Whatever it was, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is it. So I totally agree with you that I believe that the planet that does rule podcasting has to be Mercury.
Yeah.
Because of the communication factor. It's providing information.
Yeah.
And therefore, I would assume that if people do podcasting or listen to podcasts, Mercury is one of those planets that we all talk, we all listen, we all have conversations.
Yeah.
So we're always using Mercury.
Yeah.
But some of us go a step further and start producing stuff.
Yeah, and maybe a little Uranian as well, because it brings in the aspect of technology.
Yes.
But any kind of communication is about technology, really, because you are harnessing anything that amplifies your voice is a technology. So whether it's a megaphone or a newspaper or a printing press or the internet, or the radio, television signals, all of those things are technologies that amplified our ability to communicate and to broadcast and to spread the word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. So very interesting, because if we look at we're considering our two Mercuries there, and for example, with your Mercury chart, right?
Yeah, my Mercury is incredibly active. It is probably the most elevated. It is the most elevated planet in my chart. It's in my 10th house, and it's very close to the midheaven.
Say no more, right?
Yeah, and then it's conjunct my sun.
What sign is it in?
It's in Virgo, so it's in its own sign.
Yeah, it's strong, right?
It's very strong, yeah. And then it's also sextile, just go down the line. It's trine Mars,
right?
So very active, very vociferous. It's sextile Saturn, so I do have that logical, pedantic, gotta be right, gotta have my facts in order kind of thing.
Right.
And it's square Neptune, which, I like to kind of speak creatively and whatever.
Yes,
And,
with flair, I would say.
Flair,
You
yeah.
use words that don't always come up. Yeah.
Yeah. $5 words is how my mother used it.
Is that right? Yeah.
$5 words. Yeah. And I've also got it trine the North Node and sextile the Ascendant. So it's my Mercury could not be more
Engaged.
Yeah.
It's incredibly well placed, and of course you are a writer in your day job.
Yeah.
But this Mercury trining that North Node, it's almost your destiny to easily express your opinion, of which you have many out there.
Yeah.
So.
And thank goodness I've found ways to do so and get paid for it and keep myself busy.
Yes.
And entertain others and inform others.
Yeah.
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 And let's talk about your Mercury.
Well, yes. So I've got my Mercury's in Leo, which is fair enough, and it's conjoined Uranus. So it's right there. It's also squaring the moon. Fair enough. And I've got it sextile the North Node. So again, it's easily part of destiny.
Yeah.
And it is, I used to be called a chatterbox as a kid and a blabbermouth. And my mother used to say when I used big words, she said, "Did you swallow the dictionary?"
Oh, that's hilarious.
Because I'm practicing my words on it. I would have word of the week, word of the day or something and write it on the board and stuff like this.
Oh, Katya told me one time that when we were recording episodes together, she said I was like a word of the day dictionary. She always learned a new word when she was talking to me. That's one of the sweetest compliments I've ever had.
Yeah. And I also then have it trine the South Node, which is fair enough. But it's trine the midheaven.
Yeah.
So for many years, I used this Mercury as the teaching part of my astrology. Then it became recently clearly the writing part, the blogging, and now it's the podcasting.
Yeah.
And initially, when we started this particular round of podcasts, I was having listened to other astrologers' podcasts. They were talking about very complicated Greek and this and that and complicated topics that don't interest me in astrology, and I don't think they interest you either. But we are very much interested in a particular type of astrology.
Yeah.
And I always like to say that we like to keep the astro conversation going so that when you've listened to our podcast, you've got something to think about over the course of the week.
Yeah, something that you can apply to your own life.
Yes.
You can use to help you in your relationships with other people, that you can use to think about politicians or history or, that celebrity you're interested in. And you can be like, oh, wow, we both have this, aspect. Maybe that's why I'm interested in this person's ideas, or maybe that's why I find this, this politician so compelling, or whatever. I like to sort of see where the parallels are. And I'm sure that, you are the same.
Yeah, it's my aim, I think our aim is to let our listeners think further and not just be a passing thing. So you've got something to ponder as the week goes by about what particular thing we would happen to be talking about.
Yeah, we're not just talking about like what's going on today or who cares like a week later. We want this to be something where people can come back and, refer to it months or years later. And
yes.
Think, oh, wow, cool. This is teaching me something.
Yes, yes. And so here we are sharing our words, sharing our opinions, which is really what Mercury is. Yeah. And we've both got pretty good placed, I think, Mercuries that we're quite happy to give our opinion.
For sure. And it's Mercury too it's more like, it's more conversational and more sort of egalitarian. I think there are planets that predispose you to be a good teacher, maybe. Yeah. Where, you're kind of more of a lecturing style. And I don't think either of us have that kind of like lecturing style, even though you have taught classes and courses, but they were much more, I think, what's the word? Where you want them
interactive.
Interactive. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Participatory. And I think that's a good thing with Mercury as well. It's much more
more workshop type things.
Yeah, it's very egalitarian.
Yeah. So this is it. So for those who listen to podcasts, one would assume that their Mercury is also well engaged, that they're tapping into and desiring further information rather than silently doing the dishes or walking the dog.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Exactly.
That's what they say. There's 3 type places where you can listen to podcasts. It's walking the dog, doing the dishes, and driving the car, which you cannot watch a video on. So that's all the audio ones. Yeah.
I would add anything where you're working out too.
Yes, in the gym. Yes, if you work out, that sounds wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, unless you're swimming. Well, actually, my mother does listen to podcasts while she's swimming.
Does she?
Yeah, she has waterproof.
Good heavens. Who knew?
Yeah, I didn't know that existed either. I was like, oh, wow, cool.
Yeah. So it's very much that Mercury has to be this planet that is associated with podcasting, which is super interesting anyway. Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to turn to a famous podcaster's chart.
Yeah.
And I'll hand it over to you, Arwynne, to introduce him to us.
All right. So we're going to be talking about the chart of Joe Rogan. And if you are unfamiliar with Joe Rogan, he is the host of the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, which is #1 on Spotify, I think probably as well as Apple Podcasts. And it has been for the last 5 years.
Wow.
He launched it in 2009. And he, just to give a little short overview of his career and his life, we'll talk about his chart, but he was born in 1967. So he is 57 years old. He's a Leo. He started out as an actor and a comedian.
Uh-huh.
So he was on the show News Radio in the 90s with a bunch of people. But so super famous, great, actually hilarious comedy show. And it was just, I think it went on for maybe 5 years. Anyway, it was a sitcom. It was really funny. And then he was a host of Fear Factor, which is one of those game shows where they make people do gross things
with
and
spiders
eat
and
bugs and do horrible, stunts and, terrifying things like that. Then he hosted some other shows like just, sort of one-off shows, conspiracy, like UFO investigation kind of thing.
Okay.
Bigfoot, people who believe in the Loch Ness Monster, things like that. He would interview people and find out.
So already he was moving into
find out why they believe in these things and how real is this? And most of it turned out there's absolutely nothing to it. And these Bigfoot people are kind of wacky
but it makes good.
But it makes great TV.
Yeah,
and people are fascinated by things like that. And he's very open-minded. So he's always been, the kind of person who would love to just talk for, now he has the platform where his episodes last for like 3 hours. And he can talk to people about anything. Like he's interviewed politicians, he's interviewed comedians, he's interviewed authors and historians and doctors and
Trump.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. But Bernie Sanders as well, and tons of people. I mean, he's been on since 2009, and I really like how he will just he'll listen and he'll give them the entire all of that time to speak about whatever they want and just give them that airtime, and he's now obviously the most popular podcast in the world. And it's really interesting to see the spectrum of types of people he can get to talk to him, because I mean, that's for me, I think that's the ideal job. Like, I would love to have his job. That's amazing. To be able to do that, to be able to talk to anybody, and then just have hours and hours to learn about all these different things. And, people who are just the best and the brightest in their field. I mean, he's talked to Annie Jacobson.
The top minds,
times.
right?
Like, she's one of the most brilliant authors, I think. And
and we did a podcast about her, didn't we?
Yeah. I mean, he talked to Obama. Like, he's,
did he? Okay.
He's interviewed almost everybody.
Anyone who's anyone. It goes through.
Yeah, I mean, it's gotten to that point, and controversially, when Kamala Harris's team, he wanted her to come on his show, and they couldn't make it work, and he's talked about how much he regrets that they couldn't make that work, but they wanted him to come to a location in DC, not at his studio, and they wanted it to be limited to only an hour or 45 minutes even, I think. And he was like, that's not the way my podcast works.
Okay,
like he tried to negotiate and tried to make it work. But yeah, and I think that really would have, I mean, who knows?
Got to the election, is that what we're saying?
No, but I mean, it would have evened the playing field a little bit more, because people think that he really tipped the scale in favor of Trump. And not to get into the controversy, but I mean, the fact that she refused it seemingly to even go on the show and to kind of to honor it, to sort of give it credence. I think
that's
really
the thing, isn't it?
Reflected poorly on her in the long run with people who were still possibly swayable. But anyway, we're not going to get into the politics of it, because that is a minefield.
But I think the point is that this is actually a very relevant platform, podcasting, and people need to see it as such.
For sure, absolutely, and it's never been more powerful than it is now.
Yeah,
literally right now.
Yeah,
because And a lot of it has to do with how popular his show is and the network of friends and colleagues that he had. I mean, Lex Friedman is a huge name in podcasting. He's a really good friend of Joe Rogan's. Totally different background. He comes from a computer science background. He was born in Russia. He has, or Ukraine, I can't remember.
Yeah.
But I mean, Lex Friedman is a brilliant guy and really interesting. And he gets like, these top scientists and technologists and coders and, AI people and really, really interesting guys. I mean, a lot of them I can't kind of make it through an episode because it's really
complicated.
It's really complicated, and a lot of those topics it's just like, oh, okay, but really interesting, and the fact that he also can go on for like 3 hours with these brilliant people. He wouldn't have been able to do that if not for, I don't think, Joe Rogan paving the way to having that kind of platform be very viable.
Exactly. And it seems that Rogan is quite he's a brilliant interviewer because he gives them enough rope to hang themselves, I don't want to say that, but to get what they have to say out.
Absolutely.
He's not cutting them off.
Right, exactly. And he feels like everybody should have a chance to speak and to be heard,
Yeah.
And even if you disagree with someone, listening to them and just like giving them the space to speak and to tell you what they believe is who could be against that? Like,
yes,
we are for free speech. We are for
absolutely
equality of opportunity and everybody having the same, level playing field of being able to, and of course there are issues, with whatever, but you can choose for yourself. You don't have to listen to it, or you can listen to it and then say, well, that was BS or whatever.
I know my sister absolutely loves him. She absolutely loves him. Yeah. And I know you do too, right?
I mean, I find that he, I really like a lot of his opinions, and I mean, he's for free speech, and he is for, everybody being able to have a platform and
Whereas previously, 50 and 100 years ago, when you had the big people like the BBC and that, they were the gatekeepers.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Whereas now
there are some gatekeepers, and that's a big problem, I think, with modern media, is that they are to say that the media is completely owned by industries is not, it's not shocking to say that. But I mean, all you have to do is if you actually watch news on TV, you'll see it sliced up every 7 minutes with commercials for pharmaceuticals and fast food. Like, what, and then you wonder, like, how this is one of the things that's wrong with the world is, like. Yes,
they've all got their axe to grind, basically. Yeah. And this is the benefit of podcasting in general, is that you and I can get on our soapbox and give our opinion.
Yeah, and there may be commercials, but at least you can fast forward through them or whatever. Yes. And also, that those are not entire industries that are bought and paid for by, weapons manufacturers or big pharma or, fast food, which is trying to poison everyone or whatever,
Yeah, we do carry ads now and again. And, but, there is a cost to running a podcast, and that's really, it's to defray cost, Yeah. Oh. So let's have a closer look at his chart. I'm just going to give the birth details for anyone who wants to cast his chart and follow along.
Yeah.
So he was born at 12:05 a.m., August 11th, 1967, in Newark, New Jersey. Newark, New Jersey, in the USA.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that is a AA rated chart. So
yeah. And that means it's exact for.
Yeah.
So when I cast his chart in preparation for our podcast, I was delighted to discover that his sun is 4 minutes different to mine.
Oh, wow.
Not a degree, not 10 minutes, 4 minutes.
That's hilarious.
So he's at 1749 Leo and I'm at 1744 Leo. So I thought, gosh, he's got to be a good guy. Because when you come across people who've got the same birthday as you, or the same sun position, let's be technically correct here. So straight off, I thought, well, there you go. He's a Leo. He's got to be a performer and so on. Exactly. And the next thing I noticed was, of course, that he's got that Jupiter is tightly conjoined the sun. Mm-hmm. Big personality.
Yep.
Going places. open discussion, and then again, because that also makes Jupiter his oriental planet, which is technically his vocation of putting it broadcasting.
Yeah.
So that is very interesting there too. And then he's also got that Mercury in Leo as well.
Yes.
And then for the rest of his chart, he's got what Taurus is the ascendant, therefore Venus rules.
Yeah.
And do you want to talk a little bit about those Venus planets, those Virgo planets there?
Yeah. So in the 5th house, he has Venus and Pluto and Uranus. They're all in Virgo, which is a generational thing. So that that Pluto-Uranus conjunction in the late 60s.
Yeah, it's huge.
Huge. Yeah. And he's got Venus right there next to those, which is actually the same placement as my partner has, because my partner was born in the mid-60s as well. So
is that right?
Yeah,
the same year?
Venus and Virgo. Interesting. Yeah.
Ah, is he the same year as Rogan?
No, a couple years.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Different. But yeah, very close. So that's interesting.
Very interesting. Yeah.
And that might also be one of the things that I like about him, because
he's connecting to your chart, let's face it, right?
Yeah, I do. Like, I went, hilariously, just a little digression, I went back and looked at all of my kind of the major relationships with men that I've had in my life, and they almost all have had Venus and Virgo.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Okay, but are his three Virgo planets connecting to your chart?
Yeah, let's see. The Venus is
at 13, Pluto's at 19, and Uranus is at 22 Virgo.
Yeah, the Venus is definitely...
Okay, the Venus is picking up some of your Virgo planets. Because clearly his son's picking up my Leo stuff, so, you know.
I think my moon is at 11 or 13 or something Virgo. So.
Okay, so that Venus is connecting there too, so that's super interesting.
Yeah, and also he's been married to the same woman since 2009, and they have 3 daughters. One was from her previous marriage, and the other 2 are their daughters together. So he is surrounded by women.
Yes.
He was raised by, he had a father, but he was raised by his mother primarily. They were divorced, and he does not speak with his father. He hasn't for ages. And so he is as masculine and as kind of archetypal, like he's a big jacked guy covered in tattoos, shaved head. He works for the UFC as an announcer. So very prototypically masculine, but at the same time, incredibly influenced by women and also an incredibly sensitive, caring, he considers himself a feminist, not, in those words, but he's very much for women's rights, for gay rights, for,
Yes. Well, he's got that conjunction of Pluto and Uranus built in, so that's always an interesting position to have.
Yeah, for sure.
And then getting onto the moon in Libra.
Yeah.
We'll just pass by that for a moment and get onto these Scorpio planets, because you and I both have Scorpio, right?
Yeah. Actually, moon in Libra, just really quickly, I would say that has a lot to do with his wanting to give everybody a fair hearing.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
So let's move on to what you said.
So we've got the South Node there at 0 Scorpio. Then he's got Mars at 11 Scorpio.
Yeah.
Is that connecting to your chart? Your ascendant is what?
My ascendant is at 2 degrees Scorpio.
Oh, is it 2? Okay,
Yeah.
so you're connecting there to that South Node, yeah. So, I've got my moon at 10 Scorpio. It's just crazy how this chukka.
Yeah.
And then the Neptune at 21 and my Jupiter's at 21. So I don't know this guy, but clearly
there are connections. It's like when it's like what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
You see these little things and you're like, oh, that's why I like that person.
Exactly.
You see these little glimmers and you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense why this person, resonates with me.
Exactly. And because he's got all this Scorpio and Mars is in Scorpio, he's happy to go into, I want to say, the dirt, to dig down to the core problems or issues, the foundational issues that created whatever he happens to be discussing. And he's not just skimming the surface.
No, absolutely. And deep dives into all of these different topics, and also not afraid to confront people and to argue with people and to be the face of whatever and have people come after him. He's like, I don't ever read comments.
I do know.
I'm going to say what I want. I'm going to talk to who I want. No one's going to silence me. And if you don't like it, you don't have to watch it. And he'll defend himself, and he has had to a lot in the last few years. But he has very passionate opinions, but he's also very open-minded and wants everybody to be able to come to him and if they're reasonable or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, so I respect that, and I think that Mars is also very powerful in his chart. Clearly, it's connected to a lot of things.
It is. It is.
Yeah, it's opposite the ascendant. First of all, is it? No, sorry, Neptune is opposite the ascendant, but Mars is.
So he's got this pattern, right? He's got this yod, and it's Mars, Venus, Mars sextile Venus, both quincunxing to Saturn there in the 12th.
Yeah.
This is an indication when Saturn's in that position that things come later.
Yeah.
And he's, what is he, 57 something?
Yeah. He started the podcast in 2009, but it was not popular at first. Yes. It was just him and a couple, buddies.
Now, I would suggest that when we look at charts where you've got that Uranus conjunct the Pluto, and then if you could cast your mind back to 2015-16 when Uranus was squaring that Pluto for those 7 hits, that may have been the catalyst period when he went from being and was catapulted forward because he was positioned, having done all the legwork, the Saturn, right?
Yeah.
The due diligence, and he was then positioned, and it would not have been an overnight success, because those 7 squares went on, I think, for like 22 months or something, but that would have been the period where he cemented what was actually in his chart, as many people do who are born on these years, right?
Definitely.
So we've got this yod, so it's pointing at Saturn in Aries in the 12th house.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting one.
The finger of God, the finger of, what do they call it? The finger of fate. That it comes later. And what this suggests to me is that he's still a young man at 50-something, and the best is yet to come because it's Saturn, which happens, when he gets his next Saturn return, which will be when? Next year or the year after his Saturn's at 12 Aries, that will then totally trigger that once more to perhaps take him on a different direction or different strategy, or just become, be able to, I want to say, sacrifice to give back more than what he does now, which I don't know what he does now, but clearly that would be a place where he would be in a position to even be philanthropic.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
To whatever cause he's warms to.
Yeah.
Because you can't help everybody. We all have our little causes that we give to, but I think that might be a way that might unfold.
Yeah, super interesting. Maybe a move into politics.
Whoa. Okay, so when we have a look at his chart in general, we see that most of the planets are actually below the horizon, so they're in the private sector, basically, which is often an indication of an introvert. But anyway,
in that second quadrant, actually, almost everything.
Yeah,
because it's a huge quadrant. We're doing
4, 5, and 6.
So the 4th, 5th, and 6th. Literally everything but Saturn
is in that.
North Node is in that one quadrant.
That's right.
Crazy.
Mm. And I think because Saturn is in that private, quieter 12th house too.
Yeah.
That what I was mentioning earlier, that
it's kind of a late bloomer thing.
Yes, a late bloomer thing. I reckon the second Saturn return that we're going to watch, keep an eye on it, Arwynne. We'll pay attention to when it occurs for him. He's actually going to propel him forward.
Yeah.
And he would more likely to become someone who we all know.
Yeah.
And I can't remember, what was the name of that American interviewer who had the glasses? He used to be on at night when he used to wear braces.
Letterman. Letterman,
and how old was he? They get better as they get older. Yeah. So I think Rogan is likely to rise to even greater heights, and it will be done through even people like us mentioning him, discussing him, as our little podcast here in this corner of the world, putting it forward because he's made an impact on our lives. So we're happy to pay it forward.
Yeah, and I know that I don't want to second guess the quote unquote haters, but I will say, just on the topic of, because I mentioned him to someone once, and someone I am very close to, and they said, "Oh, isn't he kind of problematic?" And I kind of gave them a bit of a lecture, because clearly that they had never listened to his actual podcast. They didn't. Right. All they knew was that they had seen on the news that he had, some controversial people on. It was during COVID, and so people were terrified that he was, kind of questioning, like, well, is this really a vaccine if it doesn't actually protect you against it, and if it only just minimizes the symptoms, and why does someone who's super healthy have to take it if it protects you? Why does everyone have to, et cetera, et cetera? So he's just asking questions. And but it was like, oh, you can't question anything, like we're in a pandemic, you can't question anything, and that was a very controversial thing. And so now that we've kind of moved past that whole,
period
of, a lot of hysteria, let's just, be real. Like people were very frightened, and we've moved out of that. And I think a lot of people heard about him from the news media and heard things that were very misleading and very sort of, what's the word?
Controversial?
Yeah, but controversial in a way that...
Propaganda.
Kind of propaganda, yeah. And also just, kind of picked and chosen and that don't really represent, what he actually believes.
Yes.
And I think he was kind of a figurehead for people, in the mass media wanting to kind of lock down control over
everyone's opinion and voice.
Yeah. And and he is in a non-traditional media, and the major news media is losing viewership, like hemorrhaging viewership, really.
Yes.
So but
to this podcaster.
Yeah, and to all podcasters. I mean, I get all of my news from podcasts, basically. I do not go to any of the major news sites, and
I don't have cable. I can't even get there if I wanted to.
And there's on my work laptop, there's a little feed of news that kind of pops up, and I glance through it every once in a while, and whatever, But if I want to actually learn about it, I'll go to YouTube and I'll
search for the video.
Go to one of the podcasters that's an independent podcaster that I actually, not Joe Rogan. He's not a news guy, but I'll go to Glenn Greenwald or Breaking Points or whatever. You know what I mean? One of those, and. Matt Taibbi, whatever. And anyway, just all of this is to say, before you form an opinion about someone, actually listen to them. And,
listen to them. So this is what we're saying.
Be open-minded, because that is mercurial. Being mercurial is to be open-minded.
Don't be closed-minded. Don't be narrow-minded.
Yeah.
Open it up.
And then if you disagree, great.
Move on. Yeah. You don't need to listen to another one.
No, exactly. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's a great attitude to have. It's the way, but this is new, isn't it? It wasn't like this, 30 years ago. It just wasn't. You just had what was fed to you. We wouldn't have had a voice
30 years ago. But that's the beautiful thing about it. We can have a podcast. A lot of people think that what we talk about is controversial. A lot of people think that, not to get into that kind of, but yeah, there's a lot of haters who think that we shouldn't be talking about astrology.
I know. So, we get those messages.
Yeah, I don't see those.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Yeah, so.
All right, so this time we've had a closer look at podcasting. We've had a look at the planet that rules podcasting, which is Mercury. We've explored it a little bit in some podcasters' charts, i.e. us. And we've also looked at the most famous podcaster in the world at the moment, Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
And we've looked at his birth chart and postulated where he's going with what he's doing, right?
Yeah. Super interesting.
Yeah. So if you found value in this episode, please do consider sharing it with anybody who'd be interested. Make sure you're getting our newsletter, and you can sign up for that at starzology.com/newsletter. And also make sure you're following Arwynne, and you can find her at...
I'm at mspink.net. That's mspink.net. And I send out a weekly newsletter every Saturday. I'm blogging about art and movies and books and any old thing that interests me.
Yeah.
Yeah, give it a follow.
That's great. So, Arwynne, thank you so much for being with us again today.
Thank you. It's been great.
And thanks so much to our listeners, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thanks so much for getting this far through the episode. I just want to take a moment to tell you about the two main options of my astrology services. So the first one is coaching. If you are an aspiring astrologer, and by that I mean someone who's perhaps a hobbyist astrologer or someone who's learning astrology or a student, or you've got a few books and you've been doing it for a while, but perhaps you need a little bit of help to bring it all together, then maybe getting some astrological coaching from me would be the answer for you. The astrology coaching I offer is a 1-hour session on Zoom, and it's tailored to answer your particular questions. For example, if you have issues with natal chart readings, we can go there. Or if you're having problems working with your forecasting, we can go there. Or even basic astrology stuff, or even getting yourself organized for your astrology business. The idea is that astrological coaching will answer your particular questions. It's tailored specifically to you and where you are in your astrological journey. and I'm happy to help you out with some guidance about how you can get going, what to focus on, and what to dismiss. So that would be the astrological coaching for people trying to learn astrology. The second astrological service I offer is consultations. So this is for someone who perhaps doesn't know anything about astrology, but they just want to have their chart read or get their chart done. Call it what you will. So once more, this is a 1-hour consultation over Zoom. I will interpret your chart, tell you about the main features, tell you about where the energy is flowing, and all the rest of what is entailed in a thorough natal chart interpretation. I can also add in some forecasting in there too, bearing in mind we only have 1 hour. So just in summary, I've got coaching for people who want to learn astrology, and I've got consultations for those who want to get an astrology reading done. I'm Alison Price from Starzology.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.